let's look again at what theology of the body teaches us here. The body reveals the mystery. The body makes visible the invisible. That's the thesis statement, in fact, of the teaching. That the body and only the body is capable of making visible spiritual and divine things. Spiritual and divine things are invisible, but Christianity is the visibility of the invisible through the body, through the incarnation of Christ. So let's look at the body. What does the body teach us about why is God the bridegroom? Why is the church the bride? If you look at the very mystery of that one flesh union, it is the bridegroom who gives the seed. It is the bridegroom who gives the gift to the bride. And it is the bride who opens to receive that gift, conceive that gift, and bear it forth. The Apostle John puts it this way. This is love. Not that we have first loved God, but that God has first loved us. This is why the imagery is not merely arbitrary. We couldn't flip it over. God is not the bride and we the bridegroom. That changes everything. God is always the bridegroom because He initiates the gift. He is always the giver of the love. He is always the giver of the gift. We are bride because we, all of us, male and female, we must first open to receive God's love. Only then can we conceive it and bear it forth. The real distinction we're talking about here when we use this imagery of the bridegroom and the bride, the real distinction we're talking about, what it points to, is this distinction between the creator and the creature. Now, careful here. We're not saying men are divine and women are not. Men and women are equally creature. That's why in this analogy we are equally bride. All of us are called to open to receive the gift of the Creator. And here, if men get squirrely, all we need to do is look to Jesus. Jesus is also, in relationship to the Father, receptive before His love. Jesus says, as the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. You must first receive my love. You must first abide in my love. Only then can you love one another as I have loved you. There's the model. The Father gives the love to Christ. Christ gives the love to us. We must receive that love as bride. Then we can share it with others. You cannot give what you do not have. That's why we're bride. What is the fulfillment of the gospel? What is the new commandment Jesus gives us? Love one another as I have loved you. How do we do that? I look in my own heart as a fallen man and I say, I can't do that. Jesus says, if you even look with lust in your heart at another woman, you've already committed adultery in your heart. What am I supposed to do with that? I don't know any other way to look as a fallen man. This is precisely the point. Only when I recognize that I cannot do what Jesus is asking me to do on my own, because the strength is not within me, I'm a fallen man, only then do I get on my knees and open myself, to use the analogy, like a bride, to receive the gift of divine love into my heart so that I can then share that with others. What we're talking about here, Christian sexuality, living a life of Christian virtue in the sexual realm, is not a matter of repression of sexual desire and sexual attraction. No, it is a matter of the redemption of sexual desire and attraction. What do I mean by that? The Apostle Paul, again, in Romans chapter 8, speaks of the redemption of our bodies. Not just a redemption of my spirit, a redemption of my whole humanity, body and soul. And within this redemption of our bodies is the redemption of sexuality itself. I'm tempted any number of times to look at other people with eyes of lust. What should I do then? What are my options when I experience that temptation? Most people think you only have two options: indulge it or repress it. If these are the only two options, indulge or repress, well then which one looks more holy? This is why I think so many Christians have seriously deep-seated sexual problems. Because we repress. We think this is holy. We stuff it, and then it explodes in all manner of unhealthy and unholy ways. We think repression of sexuality is holy. We think repression of sexuality is the path of holiness. It is not the path of holiness. It's the deception. It's the deceiver's idea that this is going to make you holy. We're falling for his own lies if we think that's going to make us holy. If we just stuff and reject our sexuality, we've not overcome the lies of the enemy. We've inadvertently bought into them. Christ calls us to something very different. He calls us to an experience of the redemption of sexuality. Not indulge, not repress, redeem. What do I mean? Here's a prayer that I pray whenever necessary, whenever I'm in a temptation to lust. It goes like this. Keeping in mind, of course, that all sin is, all lust is a twisting of what God created in the beginning to be true, good, and beautiful. In the beginning, they experienced sexual desire as nothing but the very power to love in the image of God. How do we know this? Because they were naked without shame. When they sinned, sexual desire became inverted, twisted, self-seeking. Christ comes into the world, dies on a cross, rises from the dead, so that we too can live a new life. So here's my prayer. It goes like this. Jesus, thank you for the beauty of this woman. Thank you for the gift of my own sexual desires and attraction. I recognize, however, this twisted, lustful desire in my heart, and I ask you, please, dear Jesus, by the power of your death and resurrection, to untwist in me what sin has twisted, so that I might come to experience sexual desire as you created it to be, as the desire to love in your image. Do you see the difference between that approach and, I'm not going to think about that, I'm not going to think about that? And do you see the difference between that approach and, hey, I am going to think about that? Indulge is not the solution. Repress is not the solution. Walking right with Christ into the mystery of his death and his resurrection. That is the solution. And I hold my arms out here in cruciform for a reason, because this is what it demands of us. If we take the words of Christ seriously and the call of the Apostle Paul seriously to enter into Christ's death, we're going to feel it. And I say to men and women who are struggling with sexual sin, the next time that temptation hits you like a tidal wave, you get yourself in the shape of a cross and you stay there until you make a Passover from lust to love. That's the fruit we bear when we open ourselves like a bride to the gift of that. Let's just apply the image. It's a divine, invisible seed that we are all called to open and receive. Remember, the Scripture teaches we are born again, not of a husband's seed, but of the very immortal, eternal, invisible seed of God. This is why we call God our Father, because He initiates that gift. He gives that immortal, invisible, eternal seed that shoots us into being. All fatherhood on heaven and earth comes from God the Father. I have the privilege as a man of being called to image the Father in giving up my body, just as Christ did for my wife. That's what the Apostle Paul tells us. Husbands, love your wives. How? As Christ loved the church. How did Christ love the church? This is my body given for you. This is the deepest biblical meaning of human sexuality. We're called to image Christ's love for the church. The wife is called to open to receive the gift of her husband, just like the church opens to receive the gift of Christ. And in this union, boom, new life comes to the world. No wonder the devil attacks our sexuality. He knows this. He knows that the body is meant to convey and communicate to us as human beings the eternal love of God. He knows that the union of man and woman is a foreshadowing of the eternal union of Christ and the church. That's precisely why he attacks it. And we as Christians, for too long, we have fallen for his lies by rejecting the body and running the other way. That's exactly what he wants us to do. No, the theology of the body by John Paul II, not just a gift for Catholics, for Christians the world over, and indeed for every man and woman on the planet, to reclaim what the devil has plagiarized, so that we can once again see the body and human sexuality as God created it to be, as a great mystery that foreshadows our eternal destiny of union with God.
Pure passion that beats for Christ alone.